the moment Donald Trump stepped into the Oval Office. Observers noted a palpable shift in tone, a departure from traditional diplomatic decorum, and a willingness to upend established international norms. Within weeks, the international community began to question the reliability of U.S. commitments. In what can only be described as a dramatic reorientation, Trump's administration rapidly began dismantling long-standing alliances, opting instead for policies that reflected a blend of transactional pragmatism and unilateral assertiveness. In his first months in office, Trump set the stage for what would become an era of diplomatic isolationism. His administration's decision to publicly challenge multilateral institutions and alliances sent shockwaves across global capitals. Traditional allies in Europe and beyond were left scrambling to reassess their security and economic strategies, as former partners in defense, trade, and diplomatic endeavors watched in disbelief. The emerging pattern was clear. The U.S. was no longer the linchpin of the global order it once was. The ramifications of this early pivot were soon felt in every sphere of international relations. Allies began to voice concerns not only about Trump's unpredictable rhetoric, but also about his administration's concrete policy moves. The subsequent sections detail how these policies, whether through military aid decisions, contentious diplomatic engagements, or aggressive economic measures, have cumulatively eroded trust and strained relations with nations that had long been a part of America's inner circle. Perhaps one of the most striking indicators of Trump's distancing from traditional allies has been the abrupt suspension of military aid. The decision to halt U.S. military assistance, particularly to Ukraine, was not made in a vacuum but as part of a broader pattern of recalibrating American commitments to international security. This move has not only jeopardized the defense capabilities of nations relying on U.S. support, but has also raised serious questions about the credibility of American promises. On February 28, 2025, a heated meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky ended in disarray after discussions regarding a proposed mineral resources agreement soured. The fallout from this encounter was swift. Trump announced a suspension of all military aid to Ukraine, a decision that sent ripples through the geopolitical landscape. Critics argued that this move effectively left Ukraine exposed at a time when it needed reassurance the most, while also casting a long shadow over U.S. commitments to NATO allies across Europe. The consequences of suspending military aid were far-reaching. European allies, long accustomed to the U.S. playing the role of a steadfast security guarantor, now faced the possibility of having to rearm themselves in an increasingly volatile region. In response to the uncertainty, European nations began mobilizing initiatives to shore up their own defense capabilities. The most prominent of these was an ambitious plan dubbed Rearm Europe, an €800 billion initiative aimed at reducing dependence on American military support. This dramatic shift in military policy was emblematic of a broader trend. The U.S. was retreating from its role as the guardian of global security. The decision not only signaled a willingness to sidestep established defense pacts, but also left allies questioning whether future crises would find them abandoned by the very nation they had long depended on. As military aid dwindled and self-reliance became a necessity, the geopolitical landscape was left with a stark reminder of Trump's transformative and often disruptive vision of American foreign policy. In addition to the military aid debacle, Trump's presidency has been marked by a series of confrontations with European allies. The transatlantic bond, once considered unbreakable, has been steadily eroded by policies that many see as a betrayal of shared values and mutual interests. Key flashpoint has been the administration's approach to trade relations and economic policy. On February 26, 2025, Trump's announcement of a 25% tariff on imports from the European Union marked a turning point in U.S.-EU economic relations. The tariffs were ostensibly imposed to address alleged trade imbalances and to safeguard American industries, but the move was widely interpreted as a punitive measure against allies who had long been considered partners in economic progress. European leaders responded with a mix of indignation and strategic recalibration. The tariffs threatened not only to disrupt trade flows, but also to undermine the economic interdependence that had been a cornerstone of transatlantic cooperation. In an atmosphere of rising tension, high-level diplomatic engagements were canceled, and discussions on defense and security were suddenly overshadowed by economic self-interest. The European response was swift. French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer emerged as vocal critics of the U.S. approach, advocating for a more robust and independent European defense posture. Their criticism was not merely rhetorical. It spurred concrete steps toward establishing greater autonomy from U.S. military and economic oversight. The European Union, in its quest to protect its own strategic interests, began to explore avenues to counterbalance what was seen as American overreach. The result was a palpable shift toward a more multipolar international order, where European nations sought to assert their independence in both economic and security domains beyond trade. Trump's diplomatic engagements with European leaders have been marked by a style that many see as abrasive and dismissive. His public criticisms, often laced with personal insults and derisive commentary, have further alienated key European figures who once saw the U.S. as a reliable partner. The cumulative effect has been a gradual unraveling of the Transatlantic alliance, a partnership that has defined global politics since the aftermath of 2800 World War II. With each contentious policy decision, Trump has chipped away at the trust and mutual respect that once underpinned the U.S.-EU relationship. A discussion of Trump's foreign policy controversies would be complete without addressing the explosive incident involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. What initially began as a promising dialogue over a mineral resources agreement rapidly deteriorated into a public spectacle that encapsulated the broader discord between Trump and his international allies. During a much-publicized meeting in late February 2025, Trump and Zelensky clashed over the terms of a proposed deal designed to secure economic support for Ukraine. The discussions, which had the potential to strengthen bilateral ties and fortify Ukraine's economic standing, instead exposed deep-seated differences. Reports indicate that the meeting ended abruptly, with Trump's administration citing concerns over Ukraine's commitment to peace negotiations with Russia as the reason for suspending U.S. military aid. For Ukraine, the fallout was immediate and severe. With U.S. military aid frozen, Ukraine faced an existential dilemma. The nation, already embroiled in a long-standing conflict with Russian-backed separatists, found itself increasingly vulnerable. Critics argued that Trump's actions not only betrayed an erstwhile ally, but also jeopardized the delicate balance of power in Eastern Europe. President Zelensky, known for his charismatic leadership and unyielding stance on Ukrainian sovereignty, was left to navigate a treacherous diplomatic landscape with one of the world's most unpredictable leaders. The incident with Ukraine also had profound ripple effects across Europe. The suspension of military aid was perceived as a sign of America's waning commitment to the security architecture that had underpinned European stability for decades. European nations, already reeling from the economic and diplomatic fallout of Trump's tariff policies, now had to confront the possibility that the U.S. might abandon them in the midst of escalating regional conflicts. The Ukrainian debacle thus became a symbol of a broader trend, a U.S. foreign policy that prioritizes short-term political gains over long-standing strategic commitments. In the aftermath, Zelensky's willingness to negotiate and secure a mineral resources deal was met with cautious optimism by some quarters, but the damage had been done. The diplomatic scars from the meeting continue to affect Ukraine's international standing, and the incident has cast a long shadow over any future negotiations between the U.S. and its allies in the region. The message was unequivocal. Under Trump's leadership, even long-standing allies are not immune to abrupt policy reversals and unpredictable shifts in strategic priorities. Parallel to the military and diplomatic debacles has been Trump's aggressive pursuit of a trade war with key allies. In what many viewed as an act of economic brinkmanship, Trump's administration embarked on a series of tariff impositions that have not only strained relationships, but also threatened to upend the global economic order. On March 3, 2025, Trump unveiled a sweeping tariff policy that targeted imports from Canada, Mexico, and even extended to the European Union. The imposition of a 25% tariff on EU imports was perhaps the most consequential of these measures, striking at the heart of transatlantic trade. The tariffs, justified by claims of correcting trade imbalances and protecting domestic industries, were met with immediate and vehement opposition from European leaders. The reaction was swift and decisive. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau dismissed the move as a very dumb thing to do, and both Canada and Mexico quickly announced retaliatory measures that threatened to escalate the conflict into a full-blown economic war. The economic implications of this trade war have been profound. Major European industries, from automotive manufacturing to agriculture, now face the prospect of diminished access to the world's largest economy. Financial markets reacted with significant volatility as investors braced for the uncertain fallout of a prolonged economic confrontation. For many traditional allies, Trump's tariffs have not only represented an affront to economic sovereignty, but have also catalyzed a broader movement toward economic self-sufficiency and regional integration. In response, the EU has been actively exploring alternatives that would reduce its dependence on U.S. economic policy. Discussions range from forging new trade agreements with emerging markets to bolstering intra-European trade through innovative economic policies. The goal is clear: to create a more resilient and autonomous economic bloc that is less vulnerable to the whims of distant policymakers. This shift, however, is as much a reaction to Trump's tariffs as it is a proactive move toward a more multipolar global economy. The trade war underscores a fundamental point about Trump's broader strategy. In his pursuit of immediate gains for American industries, he has inadvertently alienated the very nations that have long been the backbone of the international economic order. The result is a precarious balancing act in which traditional allies are forced to choose between enduring loyalty to the U.S. and embracing a new, independent path toward economic security. As tariffs pile up and retaliatory measures mount, the fabric of transatlantic cooperation appears to be unraveling before our eyes. When a leader as provocative and unpredictable as Trump enters the arena of international relations, the fallout is not confined to isolated policy areas. It reverberates across the entire spectrum of global trust. Allies that once shared a common vision now find themselves questioning the reliability of a nation that has repeatedly proven to be a wild card on the world stage. Every decision, from suspending military aid to initiating a trade war, sends ripples of uncertainty through the international community. European allies in particular are now forced to reconsider the nature of their relationship with the United States. The notion of a steadfast partnership, grounded in mutual defense and economic cooperation, has given way to an environment of skepticism and recalibration. Leaders are increasingly vocal about the need for a more balanced and equitable international order, one that does not hinge on the benevolence of a single, unpredictable power. This erosion of trust extends beyond government corridors to the public sphere. In many European capitals, the sentiment is one of betrayal and disillusionment. Citizens who once revered the U.S. as a beacon of freedom and security now view its policies with a mixture of incredulity and concern. The cultural and political bonds that have long united the West are showing signs of strain, as the unpredictable nature of Trump's policies undermines the very foundations of transatlantic solidarity. Moreover, Trump's foreign policy has inadvertently fueled the rise of alternative alliances and regional power blocs. Nations that once looked to the U.S. for guidance are now actively seeking out new partnerships that promise a more reliable and balanced approach to international affairs. The domino effect is palpable. As one ally drifts away, others follow suit, collectively reshaping the geopolitical landscape into a more fragmented and multipolar world. The very idea of a unified Western alliance is now under siege, replaced by a cautious recalibration of interests and a reimagining of what true international cooperation should look like. As we stand at this critical juncture in global politics, the question remains: can the U.S. mend its fraying alliances, or has Trump irrevocably altered the international order? The short answer is that the road to reconciliation is steep and fraught with challenges. The long-term implications of Trump's policies are only beginning to emerge, and while there may be opportunities for rebuilding trust, the scars are deep and the wounds are still fresh. Should there be a change in leadership, one of the immediate tasks will be to reassure traditional allies that America is committed to its long-standing partnerships. This will involve not only reversing policies that have alienated key allies, such as the suspension of military aid and the imposition of punitive tariffs, but also engaging in genuine diplomatic outreach to rebuild trust. However, the process of mending broken bonds is never instantaneous. Years of collaboration and shared commitment can be undone by a few contentious decisions, and restoring confidence will require consistent, transparent, and cooperative policies over the long haul. One of the most profound shifts may be the increased emphasis on regional and independent alliances. European nations in particular are already laying the groundwork for a future less dependent on U.S. leadership. Initiatives like Rearm Europe are more than just stopgap measures. They represent a strategic recalibration toward a future where Europe plays a more autonomous role in global security and economic affairs. As Europe and other regions move in this direction, the global balance of power could shift in ways that were unimaginable just a few years ago. Economic resilience and the new global order. The trade war initiated by Trump is a harbinger of a larger trend: the move toward economic self-sufficiency and resilience. With the U.S. opting for protectionist policies, traditional allies are compelled to forge new economic partnerships that are less reliant on American goodwill. This reorientation could lead to the emergence of alternative economic blocs that challenge the long-held dominance of the U.S.-led global order. While this transition may be disruptive in the short term, it also holds the promise of a more balanced and equitable global economy, provided that nations can navigate the transition without falling into economic isolationism. Perhaps the most concerning aspect of Trump's policies is their impact on global security. The suspension of military aid and the reduction of U.S. commitment to international defense pacts have left a vacuum that rival powers are all too eager to exploit. As traditional allies become more self-reliant, the prospect of a fragmented and less coordinated approach to global security becomes increasingly likely. This new reality may invite opportunistic actions by adversaries, potentially leading to a more volatile and unpredictable international security landscape. The story of Trump's tenure is one of dramatic reversals, contentious decisions, and an unabashed willingness to ruffle feathers on the international stage. From the early days marked by bold assertions of American dominance to the later controversies that saw military aid suspended, alliances fraying, and trade wars ignited, the trajectory is clear. The United States is losing its allies. The consequences of these policies are profound, with long-term implications for global security, economic stability, and the very notion of international cooperation. The international community is now at a crossroads. On one hand, there is the hope that a new leadership paradigm might restore faith in the U.S. as a reliable partner. On the other hand, the damage inflicted by years of unilateral and often unpredictable decision-making may be too deep to mend quickly. As European nations and other allies seek to assert their independence, the traditional pillars of American influence are rapidly being replaced by a more fragmented, multipolar world order. In this climate of uncertainty, the global community is forced to reckon with the reality that alliances are not immutable. They require constant nurturing, trust, and a shared commitment to common values. Trump's policies have served as a stark reminder that when a nation chooses short-term political gains over long-term strategic relationships, the price can be the erosion of the foundations upon which those relationships were built. The fallout is not just political or economic, it is personal for millions of citizens who once looked to the U.S. as a symbol of steadfast commitment and global leadership. The human cost of diplomatic isolation, economic instability, and weakened security alliances is incalculable. For the allies who have long been partners in the quest for peace and prosperity, the message is clear. The era of unchallenged American leadership is over, and a new, more uncertain chapter in global politics is just beginning. As we look to the future, the challenge will be to forge new paths of cooperation that acknowledge past mistakes and build on a more inclusive and balanced vision of international relations. Whether this can be achieved remains to be seen, but one thing is certain. The legacy of Trump's tenure will be defined by the dismantling of alliances that once formed the bedrock of global stability. The United States, once the undisputed leader of the free world, now finds itself in a precarious position, one where the loss of allies is not just a diplomatic setback, but a profound reordering of the global power structure.